Whether you are thinking about quitting smoking, drinking less alcohol, or aiming to move towards a healthier body weight, change is required in one form or another. We know that in many cases, chronic diseases such as type 2 diabetes, some cancers, cardiovascular disease, and stroke can be prevented by modifying our unhealthy lifestyles. So I have reached out to a nursing colleague who is a specialist in change management to help us understand more about change. Sophie Zhang is a highly accomplished organizational change manager and executive leadership coach with a totally unique blend of expertise and experience in strategizing organizational change in the area of digital transformation, system integration, and cultural reform. The portfolio of clients Sophie serves includes some of the largest government departments. I'm most excited about having Sophie on our podcast today because of her unique perspective based on her own journey of change and transformation. Her achievements professionally and personally are simply extraordinary. I might also add that it was Sophie that taught me how to use lunch breaks for attending the gym. We used to work together in Canberra and with lightning speed zip down to the nearest gym to do a HIIT class, shower, and change and be back at our desks in 45 minutes. So it's with my great pleasure to introduce our guest today, a dear friend and colleague of mine, Sophie Zhang. Welcome, Sophie.
Hi, Ros. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. To everyone who is listening today, I truly appreciate your time. So, my perspective and approach are always evolving as I continuously learn and grow. So, in the field of consulting and coaching I'm in, achieving rapid, radical results often requires integrating the principle of health and well being. After all, health and vitality are the very foundation of our career and business success, fulfilling relationships and financial freedoms. I hope that by sharing my experience and insights, I can provide you with some of the tricks of my trade, so to speak, on your journey towards a fulfilled life.
Thank you, Sophie. I'm sure you can provide lots of tips. We're looking forward to hearing all about them. How can someone in the pre-contemplation stage, when they're not yet considering change, begin to recognize the benefits of healthier habits?
Yeah, Ross, of course, that's such a great question. I guess there are many research and methodologies out there. While many are very useful, most of them can be very complex. So I prefer to keep it really simple. I use a three-step approach in both my professional and personal life when it comes to, do I want to change? Why do I want to change? So step number one, who I consider is really the knowing. So first, you need to know why you must change now. So from my experience, transformation can happen quickly in one of two ways. So one is crisis. Something catastrophic happens, like a serious health diagnosis, the death of a loved one, or losing a job. It is when people feel like the world is crashing down on them. And the second one is really necessity. So a strong desire to achieve a future goal, like just simply wanting to walk your daughter down the aisle in 20 years. This can often drive people to put out that cigarette and never pick it up again. While crisis and necessity can be very painful experiences, but it could also be the very catalyst to drive the radical transformation. One of the many examples I can think of right now is Steve Jobs. So in 1985, Jobs was forced out of Apple, the company he co-founded. So this was a significant personal and professional crisis for him. I think Jobs described his experiences of as the tails between his legs when he left the Silicon Valley. But what he revealed later on was that in this particular period of this profound failure, he became a beginner, curious and really excited about what's possible. And this is when he founded Pixar. the world-renowned animation studio that produced blockbuster animation films like Toy Story, Finding Nemo, one of my personal favorite of all times. So in 1996, Apple acquired Pixar and Jobs returned to the company and introduced groundbreaking products like the Mac, iPod, iPhone, and iPad, and really transforming Apple into the Apple that we know today. So rapid transformation can happen with crisis and necessity. But then there's the change that most people are probably more familiar with, where people make very small progress, then fall back into their old habits. This is like very much like just being interested, swiped on a video on social media. So I decided, oh, maybe I should, I don't know, try a new diet because it sounds cool. But it often it doesn't stick because the commitment is just not deep enough. Then the next one is really about taking action now and staying consistent with that. And it could be as simple as just starting with getting a pair of proper walking shoes, putting the time in your calendar for exercise, booking in the coaching sessions that you may be thinking about for a very long time, or even signing up for the training that for the skills that you have been looking for to develop your career. So the key is really to get started and keep going. And finally, what I want to cover is the evaluation process. Evaluate your progress. And that involves checking in with yourself regularly, really asking yourself, how do you feel? How do I feel? Am I on the right track? And most importantly, celebrate your successes and be kind to yourself if you slip up. It's about maintaining consistency and staying committed to your goals. Just circling back to the second part of the question, why do we resist change? It's human nature. Our brain's wired to seek comfort and avoid uncertainty. So when that little voice says it's too cold to go to the gym, why do I have to make this decision? It's just your brain doing its job. One common issue is skipping or rushing through the first stage. Understanding why change is necessary or why must I change now. Here's exercise to help with this. So if you are listening and you have a pen and paper handy, please grab one and write down the answers to these questions without overthinking. So the first one is, why do I want to be fit and healthy now? And the second question is, why is being fit and healthy important for my relationships now? And the last question could be, why is being fit and healthy important for my finances now? So whatever your goal, your dream life could look like, whatever it is that you are looking for, feel free to insert those after, the phrase of why is being fit and healthy important for my, insert your ultimate goal in there.
It's just so critical, isn't it, to have that compelling reason for yourself, because that will be the catalyst for the
Yeah.
change. If you know your why is it important?
Yeah, that's so true, Ross. And I do this exercise very often with myself. I normally do that on a weekly basis, especially when I come across an area where I see exponential growth opportunity. Yet that little voice in my head says, "Who do you
Mm.
think you are? You can't do it. You're not intelligent enough. You don't have the right qualifications. You just don't. You just don't. You just don't." So this exercise really helps me to give my body a jump start and make the need for change so crystal clear.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, because what you're touching on there is mindset, isn't it? And, that voice that comes into all of us and just says, oh, you can't do it, and it might be, oh, you've tried it before and you couldn't do it, so why try again? But it's so important, if we can change the words that we tell ourselves and give ourselves positive messages, we can do it with the right tools, with the right strategies. Yes, we've got a much better chance, and we can say those messages to ourselves, and we can put them up on a board and start reinforcing that belief that it is possible.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. And like I said, change can be so simple, and all it takes is a deep knowing and the consistent action of following through what you said you are going to do, and regular evaluations to see whether it's working. If it's not, we can course correct. We have plenty of time.
Mm.
So transformation is possible. And I think it's important to remember it is okay to be human. We're all human. So it's okay to have setbacks. And what really matters is getting back on track.
That's it. And it's those obstacles and setbacks that are actually more common than we realize. It's actually just a part of the journey. Any journey has twists and turns. For most progress, it's unlikely to be a linear trajectory. There's setbacks, and we just have to get back on, keep going, as you say. That's right.
That's so true, Ross. I don't know whether the audience have seen a electrocardiogram. I will quite often in my workshops when explaining change and the inevitable events in anticipation that will happen along the way is the electrocardiogram. So if we look at the very picture of a heartbeat, a normal heartbeat, there's bumps.
Mm.
It's going up. So there's the polarizing and depolarizing of the heart. What that means is the heart will contract and then it will relax. So what that looks like when it relaxes is that there's a very steep dip in the actual picture of the heart. So what does that mean? So when we look at ourselves, if we look at the example of Steve Jobs, you can quite often see it's much easier to see it from other people's perspective and other people's stories. With a lot of people who have made tremendous amount of success, what we can quite often see is that tremendous success is built upon the very lowest point of their life. And if we use the analogy of that picture of the
Mm.
heart, the very moment the heart starts to have that, dip in that picture is when the heart itself is relaxing and taking in all of the blood to be able to pump out into every single organ of our body. So what does that mean? And how do I see it? Is there are moments that we win and there are moments we learn. And those are the moments that we take a breath and just be kind to ourselves and start to draw all of the wisdom out of the situation so we can infuse the wisdom into the rest of our lives.
Oh my goodness, Sophie, that is such a beautiful analogy. I love it. Just when we're in a dip, just to take a breath and examine it with compassion and wisdom. Oh my goodness, it's beautiful. Rather than beating ourselves up, which is what we often do in the natural response. I think that's a really beautiful analogy. Thank you.
Yeah, I think quite often the social media have conditioned us in viewing the world of there's only the up. There's all those tremendous amount of successes. People become overnight millionaires, and life is just beautiful. And there's just, apart from success, there's just no
Mm.
failure. But if we have to be true to ourselves, our very own biology is telling us that is not the norm. The norm is there's up and there's down. So if we look at the
Mm.
other heart, the picture of the heart, everybody wants a smooth ride. What happens when the heart is a flat line? It's
Mm.
when we
It's
die.
not a good sign.
That's flat line. There's no sign of life. So I think if I may, I want to quote Vincent Norman Vincent Peale, and what he said: "Problem is a sign of life."
I think it's really reassuring because there are a lot of people who would be experiencing problems in making changes to their lifestyle. It is a part of life. And in fact, at every stage of life, there's different problems. Whether you're a young mum with little kids and trying to cook a healthy dinner, whether you're a busy professional woman and you're time poor and can't be bothered at the end of the day to do that or find time for exercise. There's just different challenges, different problems at every stage, isn't there?
Absolutely.
So for many of us, we might have been contemplating making a change for a while, but life has a way of taking over and it's easy to keep putting it off. I want to look at the preparation stage. How do we prepare effectively to make a change? You talked about maybe going and buying a new pair of runners. Are there any differences if we look at preparing to adopt a new habit or preparing to remove a bad habit?
Yeah, absolutely, Ross. Well, I might not have the definitive answer. I love to share one perspective on the stages, and especially when people are thinking about adopting a new habit. So, when people decide to really change their health habits, it's a journey of managing the emotions that comes along the way. It's about finding the right meaning and commitment to see this process through. This is when we start to realize, wow, okay, there's more and more need for this particular habit that we are trying to adopt. It is really crucial, I believe, to find an empowering reason why we must change now. Without this, the adoption sometimes feels like an intellectual concept rather than an urgent necessity. And when we have the compelling reason, the level of commitment just skyrockets. We'll feel energized and ready
Mm.
to tackle any challenges that are ahead of us. And if take my own journey, like for example, many years ago, I used to be 40 kilograms overweight. And as a nurse, I knew the health risks intellectually. But that knowledge alone wasn't enough to drive the change. Because I was a single mom, I was working shift work, I was trying to work 3 jobs just to make the ends meet. I was studying full time. It wasn't until I worked with a coach and uncovered my compelling reason why being fit and healthy was vital for my career and relationships. That stuff
Mm.
made everything shift. So I went from dreading going to the gym to losing the 40 kilogram in 12 months. And as a result, gained so much momentum
Wow.
in life to becoming the person I am today. And yeah, it felt like magic looking back. But really all it took
Hmm.
was one decision, a real decision that I am going to do this. I am going to start going to the gym despite any excuses that I have come up for myself because I wanted. I want to be
Mm.
able to provide for my family. I want the best life possible for my daughter and for my parents. And I don't want to sugarcoat it. That decision took many years and lots of heartache.
It's very powerful just thinking about having that reason to look after your daughter, to look after your family, to create the best life that you can. And it's interesting that you say, it didn't happen overnight as such. That decision was sort of brewing for a long time, and then it was a line in the sand. I'm wondering, you mentioned you had a health coach. I think about this a lot and I wonder what it takes. If there is no urgency as such, there's not a medical diagnosis or what just moves a person from that it's brewing, I know I've got to do something, and then there's that line in the sand. You make that decision, and then from that point forward, everything changes. Have you got any thoughts on just how do people do that? Is it a taking time out deliberately to write things down, to evaluate their life and where they're going? And how can we do that in a tangible way? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Ross. I think in our personal lives, we often feel like we need the perfect strategy before starting. We need a
Mm-hmm.
world-class renowned coach, but I can't afford it. So therefore, I'm trapped. And I think all of this can be a trap for majority of the people. So that's the very reason why many people never get started, because they're waiting for the right moment, right
Mm.
strategy, or when they have enough money, when they have enough time. So I think circle back to my
Mm.
original point. What's more important is really the level of commitment and knowing why you must have it now. So in my consulting work with the leaders and the organizations, the right strategy at the right stage is exactly what they hire me for, and especially when for a lot of them, there's a lot at stake. There's when, hundreds or millions of dollars of government investment involved. Here, it's all about speed and efficiency and choose the simplest and most effective tool to transform rapidly. So my clients invest in these strategies because change is both important and urgent. And they don't have the time to figure
Mm.
out the processes themselves. And they can't afford the price of too many trials and errors. So I know it may sound very intense, but for everybody listening, I just want you to know to the only strategy, if there's only one thing that you can do, is to be kind to yourself. And what I mean by that is
Right.
taking the time to have a conversation, a real conversation with yourself about what you truly want in life and what health and wellness mean to you. And how is this vehicle, the body that we have been given, will carry us to the very dream life or the ultimate destiny that's designed just for us. So at the end of the day, I don't believe
Mm.
it's about having the perfect strategy when it comes to health and wellness and to get started when there's so many things that are in the way. But it's really about having a compelling reason and the commitment to see it through.
That's beautiful. I think taking the time to be kind to ourselves, to stop for a minute when we're on that treadmill of busyness and looking after everybody else and doing everything we've got to do. That's the very first step I can see, is taking the time, being kind to ourselves and giving ourselves that time to ask. During the action stage of change, what are the key factors that help individuals successfully implement and stick to their new health behaviours? I have a dear friend who has taken action 6 weeks ago and is in full swing in a gym membership program. And I'm just so excited for her. And I'm also thinking about, it's coming into winter, that there might be some obstacles coming ahead. What are some strategies that might just help her during the months ahead?
Ross, my strategy will be so simple, and I think it's probably going to sound very ridiculous. I think for somebody who is fairly self-motivated, it's always coming back to the very question. The very question I had is how do I or she connect with herself? If she was
Mm.
coming to my house and we were having this conversation during a very casual afternoon tea, I would really just by start asking her, imagine your relationship with your partner is like a garden. So how will this blossom now that you have started going to the gyms consistently? I may also ask, think of your relationship with your staff as a symphony. So how would the harmony improve now that you have taken the time out, like 30 minutes or an hour each day for your HIIT class or exercise class? And maybe it depends on the person's aspiration to look at, maybe envision your investment portfolio as a ship. How much steadier
Mm.
would it sail now that you have meditated daily to stay grounded in your decision making? So with
Mm.
friends, people, for the listeners listening, if you have friends, be the listener, asking these powerful questions to help them to uncover their own answers is quite often a very um, valuable way of helping people to stay consistent and motivated. Because what
Mm.
the common challenges people face in the early stage of change, um, and how they can overcome those to progress even further, is the three things that sort of inevitably happen. So, Ross, you mentioned about anticipation. So, if we have to be so accurate in terms of when we plan the trajectory of how we execute on the plan that we have to change, there are three things, the three patterns that regularly emerge. One is internal conflict. It's very much like standing at the edge of the cliff, wanting to make a leap but fearing the unknown. So the second one could be the lack of motivation. Yes, she has made the start, but it's going to be cold. Okay, the knees might hurt. It is so hard to get out to a car that's probably, got frozen screens. So it's like pushing a boulder uphill, finding it hard to start or even stay consistent. And the third thing for many moms out there, for example, who is juggling a career, who is juggling family, just juggling so many balls in the air can feel daunting to think about going to the gym or going to the class or doing more exercises. So that complete feeling of overwhelm is generally either stop us from getting started, or the very reason why people don't keep it consistent when after they get started. So when I began my journey, I used a simple exercise, which I still use to this very day. I wrote it down, the changes that will get me on the trajectory towards the attainment of the goals and what life will be like without it. So every single morning, I will review the list and literally write down the three actions I will take that day. There are three very simple actions that I know I will be able to do without much effort. Things like I will have, putting my calendar to do my breathing exercise for 2 minutes every hour. And I would putting 5 minutes of meditation before bedtime, and then really going to do like a online video style HIIT class for 10 minutes during lunchtime. So that literally made it a no-brainer. When I didn't have the time to go to the gym, when I didn't have the financial resources to hire the world best health coach or trainer. So without knowing, I guess, everybody's specific situation, I want to say keep things simple and manageable can produce surprising results. So think of it as planting seeds in a garden. With consistent care, we'll be so amazed at how it flourishes. So consistency is really the key.
They're very practical tips, Sophie. Thank you. I love that. Just write down 3 things each day that you can do and make them very, very achievable. A 10-minute online gym session, 5 minutes meditation at night. That's it. Whatever it is for people, keep it simple and small and achievable, and you will surprise yourself, as you say.
Oh, good.
Sophie, do you have any final words of encouragement or advice to people who would like to make changes to their lifestyle in order to live a healthier life for longer?
For everyone listening, I may not have met you in person, but I feel like we've known each other through this journey. So I'm deeply grateful that you've chosen to invest your time in listening to this podcast. Your time is precious and something I'd never take for granted. Remember, this is not an ending, but a beginning. This is the start of our journey together. And I want you to know that you deserve the very best this life has to offer. All you have to do is to decide you want it. Take that first step and believe in your ability to make the change.
My goodness, Sophie, I am so grateful that you were willing to come on this podcast and share your wisdom and your kindness and your generous heart.
Oh, thank you,
so
Ros,
much
for having me here. It's been an absolute honor.